Good to go?
Ready to go.
All right, good job. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Silver Bullet Podcast here with me, Colton Zek, and James Ogle.
Me, Jimmy.
Host. Yeah, I say me like you all can see me. If you're watching the YouTube, you can see us. But if you're listening to this in audio land, you probably think I'm an idiot. So, besides the point, we are on week 2 of our, or part 2 of our continuation talking about blood sugar. And I think it's a point worth bringing up here. We deal with a lot of people who come to us initially who have been told or advised, probably the better word, by a healthcare professional or maybe by somebody in their family who just noticed that they're going through a lot of the things that they went through or whatever, that, hey, you probably have some blood sugar issues. And it's not like it's something that is very hard to find out. Like, you can go get a tester and test your blood. You don't have to be diabetic to get a test strip and test your blood sugars, okay? So we deal with a lot of people who have come in and they said, look, here is what I was told. Somebody apparently says this is good for managing blood sugar. That's what we're talking about. We're kind of going through how we would go about working with a person coming off the streets who have no idea what's going on. They were just told, hey, you should probably exercise. Here's how it can work. Right. We are in no way trying to wear the doctor hat. If you listen to any of our podcasts before that, we're still not doctors. But we're going to make sense of hopefully something that you were told, or at least give you some new insight as to why.
Right. Yeah, we're offering a perspective of experience, and one in an area that we know, I would say, a dangerous amount about. Right?
Oh yeah, you have to, and I really hate to use the word, but it's an epidemic, in the U.S. I can't remember the percentage, but there's 2/3 of the nation is thought to be obese.
Right.
Obesity is one factor that has been contributing to pre-diabetic conditions and then type 2 diabetes, which as a recap from our first episode, guys, we kind of went through and we kind of broke down, type 1, type 2, kind of how you can metabolically transition into type 2 from being a healthy individual. It's not to say that you're an unhealthy individual if you do have type 2 diabetes. There are plenty of other factors that can contribute to it, but
Sure.
From the ones that we generally see the most often, we're talking sedentary lifestyle decisions, poor diet, poor consistency with food consumption, very high stress, all the things that we know lead to a bunch of metabolic conditions.
Well, even this, I don't remember if we talked about it on part 1, but type 2 used to be labeled as adult onset.
Right.
And now there are kids, youth who are developing prediabetes and then becoming, type 2 diabetics. So, yeah, it's an issue. We need to address it. We need to have some hopefully proper education and allow individuals to do their due diligence.
And I think it's important for everybody to know, regardless of whether or not you fit this bill. You know what I mean? Like, and we did talk about it in the first podcast. Type 1 and type 2 are vastly different, but we both knew people early on that was growing up that had the pump essentially attached to their hip because they were type 1 and they were diagnosed after a traumatic life event of some sort. But none of us knew what the heck it was. We just knew that if he didn't have that literally lodged into his side, like, he would die. And it's like, okay, that seems a little aggressive, but then you kept hearing the word diabetes kind of pick up and become more of a popular talk, through the late 90s into the early 2000s, but then it all starts to make sense as to why, just as a nation, our health has deteriorated from that point on. So I feel like it's beneficial for everybody to know at least the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Okay. And not to have a preconceived understanding of, if you're type 2 diabetic, you 100% did it to yourself, you treat yourself like crap, and now you're going to have to deal with this. I don't believe that's the case for everybody. There's certainly things that we can do to help change the outcomes, hopefully. But we'll always yield to what a medical professional tells you to do. We're just going to try to make some sense of some things. Sound good?
Let's roll.
All right. So James and I are kind of going to go along, and we're going to give you some specific examples of people that we've helped with their permission. We will leave them, nameless. We won't throw them completely out here. But we have worked with plenty of people who were pre-diabetic, some that were outright diagnosed type 2 diabetes, and they were diagnosed with that for some time. But somebody coming in off of the street, James, and I know I refer to you quite a bit on this because you get to meet initially a lot of the new clients that come into our facility. Somebody says, hey, I have been told I need to fix this. What's your conversation with them initially? And why, I guess.
Right. Yeah, we want to have a framework of kind of what's going on in their lifestyle. So how much rest are they potentially getting in the evening? We talked a lot about that in the first part of this. What is their stress like? I mean, that's going to be a big contributor to what's going on here. How long have they potentially had some maybe symptoms that line up with some blood sugar instability? How long has that occurred? And what is their daily like food intake look like? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. If they're even eating anything at all, do they exercise? What does their work look like? I mean, we're just trying to get as much of an understanding of this person's lifestyle as possible.
Gather information.
Right.
It's an intake. It's a formal intake. So many of you guys might think, okay, well, why in the heck does it matter what I do for my day job that it affects my diagnosis of being pre-diabetic? Well, it very well may not, but there's a chance that it could, and here's why. So here's some things to consider in a healthy individual. Okay, if we're talking about blood sugar instability or blood sugar management problems, you're having a hard time keeping your blood sugar in a range that your body is okay with, or in that homeostasis range where everything is where it needs to be, quote unquote. I hate using the word normal levels because I think normal levels with anything is pretty outrageous these days, but
I don't want normal testosterone levels.
So regardless, it's not where it's supposed to be. It's radically up, it's radically down. More than often, it's radically up or radically elevated. So in a healthy individual, though, let's go back to a healthy individual. Why would somebody's blood sugar raise? Well, it's pretty simple. There's a couple main reasons. One, you consume carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are broken down into sugars and then released into the bloodstream so that way they can be utilized for energy. That'd be reason number one. Number two reason why your blood sugar would rise because you're in a fight or flight stage. Your body, you're walking down the path, you see a snake, you feel your body tense up, your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases. That's your body dumping sugar into your bloodstream via your glycogen stores of your liver and kidneys, and your body's prepped to get away or fight or flight. Okay, so that'd be another reason why your blood sugar would be high. In a healthy individual, your blood sugar will raise if you consume alcohol. And a lot of people think that it's because, alcohol has a sugar compound in it, and it kind of depends on what alcohol you're drinking. But it's not necessarily that. A lot of the mixers, yes, you have a lot of sugar content in there, but alcohol itself inhibits the ability of insulin to work. And if you're somebody who has insulin resistance right now, which is common in type 2 diabetics, that's a problem because any blood sugar that you do have is going to stay elevated because insulin, you're just making the problem worse for you, right?
Just like simply put, alcohol, we're not saying alcohol's bad. We've talked a lot about this before.
Alcohol's bad if you want to look good.
Alcohol is extremely difficult for the body to detox for anybody. So, I mean, just have that understanding. Like if you already have some underlying things going on, it's only going to make things more problematic.
Right. So in a healthy individual, those are a couple reasons why your blood sugar would elevate, why it would go up. In a healthy body, that should come back down, though. So why would, in a healthy body, it come back down? Well, because you have insulin, which is the hormone that helps sugar into a working cell. That way it can be utilized for energy. Your insulin level or your insulin sensitivity, it works really well. It means it binds really well to the sugar. It's able to escort it into the cell. Everything's hunky-dory the way it's supposed to. That's one way that the blood sugar would level back out or come back down, is because with the more sugar that it takes into the cells, that blood or the sugar in the blood itself goes down. And the other thing that people don't really think about where blood sugars will level back out is when your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, they work well. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people think about and it can come down to activity, sedentary lifestyle. If you are constantly grazing, okay, you never give your body a chance to utilize the sugar that you're probably consuming. And so your blood sugar just stays elevated.
Right.
It's waiting for you to get up and demand it to be used. But if you're sedentary, you're not doing much, and you just graze, there's a good chance that your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, the one that tells you that, hey, we're hungry and hey, we're full, they don't work really well.
Yeah, the kind of a little side note with that, like my kids especially, when they're like, Daddy, I'm starving. I'm like, you have no idea
You don't know what starving is.
I mean, so, but in a healthy individual, those hormones should work in a way that allow you to really know when it's time to bring on food, or hopefully, if you're in tune with it, when it's time to shut it off. So, yeah.
So, sorry, I'm clearing my throat here. So that's in a healthy individual. Blood sugar should rise because of those couple reasons, but it should also come back down because insulin works. My hunger hormones, they work really well at telling me when to shut things off, turn things on, yada yada. So now let's go into an unhealthy individual, and we're going to assume a couple things, which you should never do, but this is hypothetical.
It's our podcast.
It's our podcast. You don't like it? That's okay. In an unhealthy individual, let's say this person is sedentary, doesn't have very good, let's say they retain a lot of body fat, they are insulin resistant, meaning they've been diagnosed as pre-diabetic at least, holding on to a little bit of excess body weight, lives a high stress life, or at least a life where they can't sit back and kind of relax and decompress. That's
everybody,
and this is a lot of people right now. Blood sugar can rise because of all of the things that we listed beforehand, but they can rise because of a consumption of a high inflammatory diet. Processed foods are usually in the form of carbohydrates, and those processed foods are usually broken down in such a rapid rate compared to regular, like fruits and vegetables, that it actually spikes your blood sugar at a more rapid rate. And even if your body wanted to, it couldn't keep up. As far as matching the amount of insulin that is needed into the bloodstream, right? If you have too much blood sugar going too fast, your body can actually overcompensate and send way too much insulin out there because it was essentially caught off guard.
Right.
And you can have something called an insulin rebound effect where you actually crash because there's still insulin in the blood looking for sugar and the sugar's gone. It's kind of like drinking a Mountain Dew. You're hyper like crazy and then you crash. That's what an insulin rebound effect.
Did you ever... funny story here. You know those those carb partitioning supplements? You know what I'm talking about? Like they mimic insulin, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
So the whole thing is
I vaguely remember those.
Load up on carbs, eat your cheat meal and whatnot.
Right, and it'll just hold on to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I am one to experiment and supplement because I do want to know how things work. And I remember a time where I took some of that and I did not eat near enough carbohydrates. And that's what was going on. I was,
Well, I had not to get too far off the topic. I had the same thing when I was in high school. I took a bunch of caffeine pills and then actually took some pre-workout before a football game. And I was a junior and I was just starting playing defense. It was awesome. I was getting jacked. It was a conference game, and I literally couldn't pick my feet up off the grass to finish the warm up. I crashed so hard.
Yeah,
it was so crazy. I don't even remember the first half. But anyways, that is an example of having too much insulin in your system. So continuing with this unhealthy individual, your blood sugar can rise because of the overconsumption of carbohydrates, consistent consumption of carbohydrates, but also because the body is constantly stressed.
Right.
And I can't emphasize this one enough because this one applies very well to the people that we're going to bring up as a specific. When you're stressed, your heart rate is elevated. Okay, you are constantly in that fight or flight mode. Okay, and then any normal stress, whether that's work-related or family-related or maybe exercising, that goes on top of that, it almost induces a panic to where the body's like, oh my God, I don't know what we're doing. Dump all the glycogen we have, put it in the bloodstream, and let's get this thing figured out. Right. It's almost like a panic. It's like, okay, and it's all regulated off of, maybe not all regulated, I don't have the science to back that up, but it's pretty much regulated off your heart rate. Mm-hmm. How hard your heart's having to work to manage everything that's going on. And it exceeds a certain point, and your body really starts to feel that excess stress. It starts dumping glycogen, which is carbohydrates. They're just stored in your muscles and in your liver.
Yep.
and they dump that sugar right in your bloodstream. So that way, when you're, I think the most common thing to do is see that during exercise, especially diabetic people, is that they get into too high of an intensity workout and their blood sugar just skyrockets.
Yeah.
That's what it's doing. You're in a fight or flight stage and your body is trying to get you out of it. So that's, once again, in a healthy individual, you should have that, but probably not to the extent that you experience it if you're somebody who has blood sugar management. Right? Or blood sugar management issues. So sticking with the unhealthy individual, you have that increase in the blood sugar. Why can't they get it to regulate back down or down regulate? Well, the simple one is because they're probably resistant, right? Type 2 diabetes, you have a resistance of insulin. It doesn't work well. It can't bind to the sugars very well. Type 1, your body just doesn't produce it. The body just can't get the sugar into the cells. Or another common theory is that there's already sugar in the cells and the cells just aren't using it. So regardless, insulin's unable to do its job.
Right.
So we've covered healthy person. Here's what happens when sugar enters in the process that should carry out. And we've covered in an unhealthy person, blood sugar goes up and the process that follows. Now we have this unhealthy person talking to us like, okay, how do I get back to, or at least gear towards the direction where my body can handle blood sugar the way it is supposed to?
Right.
Where do we go from there?
I want to touch on one thing quickly. Colton mentioned a lot about the stress response and then processed carbohydrates and then how that just continues to fuel into the problem, especially if the individual is very sedentary. The problem with processed carbs are that a lot of reason that individuals want to consume those foods, they give us quick energy. They're easy for the body to digest because there's not a lot of fibrous material or anything. Yeah, there's not a lot of nutrients there. So we get this hit of energy. The digestive system doesn't have to work really, really hard to do much with it. But the problem is, again, you crash as a result, and then you just want more and more and more.
That's your only viable way of sustaining energy levels.
Yeah.
Which can be a problem. It can be a very large problem. In a couple of podcasts, we talked about kind of the grassroots understanding of inflammation and how it is perceived in the body. We don't physically consume inflammation. It's something that is created by our body because we are consuming something or we have done something that it does not like. And that can be a reaction from food that you eat. And it's more common to find that in those foods that are so quickly broken down, like processed carbohydrates and like alcohol, probably the two biggest ones that are inflammation producing for sure. But that's a perfect segue because now we can sit down with this person. We understand that they have blood sugar issues. Where can we start from here? They obviously know they need to exercise, but what are the other things that they know that they can do to at least better their chances of kind of conquering this?
Drink plenty of water. I mean, that's one of them. It's one of the most basic things, but also when we start hopefully bringing on quality food, we got to flush things out.
Sorry, I'm making a lot of noise in my shaker bottle.
And again, we sometimes, at least I know I do, I take for granted the things that I know that are just that's something you should just do. But a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Realistically, the amount of water they drink in a day is probably less than that.
Yeah, and that kind of, I had a little bit more of a broad thing I was going to say. I was going to say you got to control the controllables. And most of us have heard that in reference to something, but if you're talking about managing your blood sugar, there's a lot of things that you can control, and there's a couple things that you can't. Okay. First, the ones that you can control. You can control your food. Okay. You can control what enters your body from a consumption standpoint. You can control urges. Okay, it's one of those things, and it is. I get it. It's a mental battle. I lose every once in a while too. But if I have my back up against a wall, against a metabolic disease, that's going to be enough to push me through and understand that I really don't need this. And screw you to all those people who say that I'm just being too selfish or whatever. I know that this can make me healtdy.
Yeah, when you're faced with that, that news, or you actually are, given that diagnosis, you just have to. There's a choice you have to make. What do I want the quality of my life to be like? Yeah. And that's just. We're not here to tell you what you are going to or what you should choose, but if you do want a higher quality of life, if you want a better quality of life, there are things you can do about it.
I'm not here to give you a motivational speech. If you need that, you can come get one, but Honestly, we're cutting the crap. It's controlling the controllables. You can control what goes in your grocery cart. You can control what ultimately goes in your mouth and what you consume. Moving on from food, you can control your sleep. A lot of people hate hearing this, but here's the biggest problem that I find with people that I work with. If you are somebody who sleeps 5 hours a night, but you are only allotting your body 5 hours of sleep, that's your own damn fault. Okay, you can't expect to get 8 hours of sleep if you go to bed at midnight and you have to get up at 6 in the morning. Right. That's dummy math. We can't do that. Okay, that's nonsense. Okay, so these are things that you can control. Now, whether or not you fall asleep initially, the first 3 days right on time, and you sleep 8 hours, that's completely up in the air. There's a lot that your body has to get used to. But if you don't start, it'll never happen. Okay, so that's something that is controllable. You can also control your mood. This might be another nonsensical thing that people think these days right now, but you can choose what you feed your brain without getting too cliche. Like, if you want to be chock full of negative crap, like, dig your face into that phone and scroll until your thumb falls off. Sure. But if you want to be uplifted and understand that you have a lot more positive energy and vibe, like, that can be something that you can seek out, and that's a controllable thing. You can literally see negativity and move away from it.
Definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, I was going to add on this. You can control the individuals who influence you, those who you are around, family, friends, whatever. I mean, if you know a particular group of people are constantly, like, just not supporting you in this endeavor, do they love you? Do they want to help you out?
That's up in the air, but they're certainly probably not helping you out. Right. And when you can control your mood, you control your mindset, you control your outlook on what you're dealing with. Okay, are you there's no doubt, like, and everybody sees the ESPN stories about the guy that was so overly optimistic about his stage 4 diagnosis, and he just absolutely beat it to death with a rag and came out the other end sparkling. Like, there is something to be said about positive mindset. Right. It has a lot to do with everything. And half of you might be listening to this and be like, you guys are literally not saying a damn thing about blood sugar, but I'm telling you, these things matter. Sure.
The first thing you got to do is make up your mind about what you want to do with it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You obviously, the food and the sleep, I think, are one of the biggest ones you have to be able to. These are physical things. Right. Okay. You physically can eat the things that promote healing. You can physically set an alarm to go to bed, not just one to get up from bed. These are things you can physically do. The mood and the mindset, those are things that you just have to have a general understanding of and a goal to push yourself that way. But the goal of all of these things, to control these things, is to limit the amount of inflammation in the body and allow the body to chill. Okay, there's so much information out there these days that show how people who mouth breathe all the time are incredibly high risk of moving towards metabolic conditions like these. Yeah. And the biggest thing with mouth breathing is it ties into that fight or flight response. Your body is constantly under a state of stress. This is the stressed out stage, fight or flight, okay? If you're constantly in that, your body only knows fight or flight, and it deteriorates from the inside out. Yep. And so when we look at these things like food, sleep, mood, and mindset, we're trying to get your body to chill out. We're trying to get it to heal. We're trying to give it the chance to rest and digest. The rest and digest phase is the opposite of fight or flight. That's the one that we want. Like, everybody needs that. And we're just looking for physiological healing.
Yeah, sorry, we have to talk about it. Was it last podcast? You asked the question, what's the biggest advice you would give anyone? And I said, I think people need to go off their phone for a week. Oh, yeah, If you use the TV, computer, iPad, phone, whatever, as your source of relaxation, I didn't say enjoyment, I didn't say entertainment, I'm talking about relaxing, you're making yourself worse.
Yeah. Go buy a bow. Go shoot some archery, man. You do things that make you smile. Like, if you literally, I think I said this to somebody. I can't remember who it was, because they were sitting after class and they were just thumb scrolling. And I don't know if they're on social media, if they're like checking emails. And I was like, does that make you happy? And they just like glared at me, and I was like, okay. It's one of those things. It's like,
he's got a way about him.
I do, yeah. If you don't know who I am, you probably would think I sound like a jerk thing to say, but it was kind of funny. So there's reasons to get into those few things, and we're going to cover some specific examples here in a second. And what's unique about these three people that we're talking about, they all came from different backgrounds, they're different age, 2 males, 1 female, and they all have a little bit of a different way that we went about working with them. And ultimately that came down to a lot of lifestyle things rather than their love for exercise and specific foods that they like to eat. It came down to what they do for a living. So like I said, we're not going to essentially talk exactly about this person, but we're going to talk about the way that we went about problem solving and found it best and what made sense to move forward. Right. The biggest thing that we want to bring up here at
Somebody's
this point
getting nasty out there right now.
Yeah, I can hear the bar dropping. The biggest thing that we want to point out here is that there is no one size fits all, but I do believe that there's a hierarchy of needs to fulfill before you go moving on. Like a lot of people. And I actually tested this just to see exactly what would happen. Like if you type in blood sugar issues on Google, like the first thing it's going to talk about is how fasting can change your life. Yep. Or how doing freaking, I don't know, Ironman training is going to turn you into this awesome person. Like there are things that are certainly beneficial, but I don't think it goes back to my point like 4 podcasts ago. People would rather be extreme than consistent. Yep. Okay. Yep. You can't do it.
Jumping right into the extreme diet, extreme fasting, extreme forms of exercise and lifting and whatnot. Like that's not usually the initial response is great, but the fall off is
it's pretty bad. The continuation of it's pretty low odds. So here's the deal. So we're going to talk about one gentleman that I was working with not too recently, or not too long ago. Sorry, and that didn't make any sense. Not too long ago, was diagnosed pre-diabetic. Had very high A1C markers, very high resting fasted blood glucose, had very high triglycerides. The blood panel was pretty poor, and it was concerning to him. He's in his, he's up, I can't remember how old he is, 40s.
Yeah, latter 40s.
So the thing is this guy lived a pretty high stress life for a very long time. And I think ultimately that's what ended up catching up to him. And as we were working, we did a lot of initial things off the top, where we did a lot of intake, we did a lot of food recording, we did a lot of sleep recording, he was testing his blood sugar every day. And one of the biggest things that we noticed is that he was having a hard time staying asleep at night. Whereas with his previous job, it would be nothing for him to have to get up in the middle of the night and go take care of a special issue or whatnot. And so sleep was always something that was very limited to him. Right. That led to a big snowball effect when it came to food. It became what is convenient, what is at my disposal, what can I consume, and on top of that, because the food was so poor, his energy levels were trash, and that became a very high dependency on caffeine. Right. So we've worked our way down to how do we move our way from caffeine? Okay, first of all, we control the controllable. We know that we can do something besides consume coffee. Got rid of it. We know that we can control when we go to bed. Started setting an alarm for it. We know that when our energy starts to deplete, there are alternate things that we can do for consumption. With his body type, with what he was sensitive to, what he enjoyed, essentially what he went to was a very basic meat, spinach, and mustard. Now,
it's Colton's staple.
It is I did a challenge last year where I challenged people to just eat spinach, meat, and mustard for a month and see what happened. It was pretty fun. So that was essentially what he did, and it's what he enjoyed. It was consistent. It was easy to do. He was able to follow it. But then it came time to figure out, okay, what can we add to this to better supply him with an ability to manage, okay? And that's where the exercise came in. Mm-hmm. We controlled the controllables. We got rid of the junk. We started putting him on a sleep schedule. We essentially lowered his ability to depend on caffeine as an energy source. Right? His body got what it needed for healing. So now we need to talk about exercise. Now, Old boy didn't exercise that much. He wasn't in here 5 times a day, killing himself and grinding himself to a pulp. But when he was in here, the only thing that he did was resistance training, weightlifting, for about half an hour. Maybe some mobility stuff. That was it. And the reason behind that was because, and like we mentioned earlier, the dude was always in a state of stress.
Right.
We couldn't afford to put him into a further state of stress because it would jack up his blood sugar again, and he would feel awful.
Yep.
He really would. It would have a 2 to 3 day effect on him. So we essentially controlled the controllables and then put a very moderate intensity strength training program. That was it. There was no fancy bells and whistles.
Right.
And it was nothing that was going to make you curled up on the floor, hurling, thinking that I'm one day closer to being awesome. It's like,
well, I mean, especially individuals who already more than likely, and I'm not saying this was his case, but what I've found with working with a lot of newer clients and just working in the fitness industry for a long time, if you start off individuals with something that they hate or they're doing something that they hate, there's no enjoyment, they can't recover, they don't build confidence from it. There is no success to be had long term. And the other thing I want to mention, just as listening to all of that, you'll hear us continue to say it over and over and over and over again. Stress is the silent killer. I mean, it will just continuously make things more dysfunctional internally. Your body just can't, your body never is able to get ahead if you constantly are just throwing more and more and more stress at it. So if we don't identify that, and you were able to with this person, there's not really much we can do to help it out.
And it's got to be, you got to find something in order to cope with it. And it's a pretty good segue into this other person we're going to talk about. This was a lady, middle-aged, was a very consistent exerciser. Has always been, I think in her words, she would say a little bit bigger boned. But she had struggled with blood sugar issues for a while.
Give them a quick like rundown on that. We've talked about it before, but endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph.
Yeah, so she would definitely identify as an endomorph, but she trained like a mesomorph.
Yeah.
So endomorph, a little bit more pear shape, especially when you're talking about females, held on to a little bit more body fat, just as just a natural kind of thing.
Not everyone is intended to look like an Instagram model, male or female.
No, and she could care less, which is, I love her to death. But she was a very consistent exerciser. Never had to worry about her missing a workout, but still have blood sugar issues. And it was a genetic thing. Family had always had this. But one thing that we noticed early on, especially when we started talking about, we went away from just trying to train in order to achieve a specific goal to training to become healthy. Mind you, she's middle-aged now. We started training to look at health, and then we started to ask ourselves why these certain things were happening. Like she would have injuries that would just be nagging and stay for a long time, and then we get to the point where we're like, holy crap, your ability to manage stress via exercise sucks. Like you can't exercise to manage your stress. Your body is not going to handle it.
Yeah.
So the same concept as what we did with the other guy. We control the controllables. There was a specific dietary way that she wanted to eat. I was fine with that as long as it was going to reduce the amount of inflammation she had in her body and got rid of all the quick fixes and all the drastic little things that she thought would fix it all off the bat.
Right.
From there, it was, sleep, good, water intake, good, mood, hit or miss. And we started looking at sleep. Then we started to look at, anxiety and some other biofeedback and digestive function. We're like, man, I just can't figure out where your underlying stress is really coming from. And then we started to look at the training. And we started to back her off of her training a little bit. And we went from 5 days a week down to 4 days a week. It went down to 3 days a week. And then it went to, hey, I need you to do yoga for like 3 weeks and see what happens. And you want to talk about the most dramatic change I've ever seen in my life?
Right.
We took away intensity via exercise and put it, away and just said, hey, I just need you to be healthy and to be happy and to enjoy not being in physical pain, muscular pain, what I'm talking about, any of that stuff. And just move well, be relaxed, and just see what the body does. And the response was great.
Yeah.
She was hitting blood sugar numbers she'd never hit, in a long time. It wasn't necessarily something where she was just shedding tons of weight, and that was the reason why her blood sugar was going down. It was literally managing her body's ability to cope.
Yep.
Cope is what I was looking for. And that's a totally drastic change from the other guy. The other guy was eliminate the garbage and do a little more strength training. Right. So it hit and miss a little bit differently. Have you ever had any experience with people like that as far as training, like backing them off and it being the biggest difference?
Mine, it's not related to blood sugar, but like we see usually the different extremes. It's a lot of individuals, they're not doing enough. We need to help them be able to do more to be able to see results. But then there's also the flip side where, in fact, we need you to do less to be able to start seeing results.
I think I have a note on here that says more isn't always better.
Yeah. I was at my worst place with health, in my early 20s, super depleted testosterone, all because of stress.
Well,
and
you were probably
too much exercise.
You were probably at your best performance, though.
Not well. I was exiting
Yeah,
that period.
Yeah. So you were in the performance stage for just a little too long.
Right.
This is why I believe that you just can't have optimal health and optimal performance at the same time.
Right.
You can be really healthy and be really good at doing something, but to actually peak, I think, is impossible. It just doesn't. The body can't handle it for an extended period of time.
Have balance, folks.
Yeah, man. And so a lot of this, there has to be a little bit of a. I don't know, and we don't see a ton of people who have been exercising for, walk into our doors and be, Ironman athletes and be like, hey, I have blood sugar issues, can you help us? You know what I mean? I would definitely try, and we'd figure something out, hopefully. But for the most part, it's if you're somebody who does fall into that wagon, like, that'd be an excellent place to start looking at where your intensity lies and where your body's able to or not able to handle stress. Because there's a good chance you're not going to be able to change what happens at work, right? Maybe you can. If you can, do it, right? If that's what stresses you out.
Right.
But if you can't control that, you got to go somewhere else to control it. If you can't control the stress of the holidays, go somewhere else where you can control stress. You can control stress by what you eat, by what you do as far as sleep schedule goes, by your mood, your mindset, and ultimately you can control it based on the intensity of your workout. And intensity can be defined with the overall weight that you move, or the overall load, or the volume that you do, and how frequently you do it. And if you can't scale those back, then we really got to start figuring out, okay, how are we going to get you to handle stress better? There's a good chance that by simply eliminating or bringing some of that back, you might see some great benefit as far as your body able to heal.
Definitely.
And chill and rest and digest. Okay, that was the next thing I have on here.
Recover.
Yeah, so, we're talking about a couple examples here, and these are vague, I know, but the point is to tell you guys that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Everybody has unique situations and circumstances, and a lot of people are really good at doing their own information, their own research, and finding out exactly what to do, but there are people that just don't understand this stuff, and this is how this can all tie together, theoretically.
Right.
And in our experience, this is how it's made sense to us. This is how we've worked with people. This is how people come in and say, hey, I got blood sugar issues. The doctor says I need to get my crap together. This is the conversation we have.
Yep.
Right? Got to get your sleep. Got to eat good food. Got to stay mobile. You can't be sedentary, and you got to make sure that whatever you feed your brain is positive and uplifting and makes you happy. Because if it's just negative Nancy all day, man, you make things hard.
I think, another thing that individuals can control, and a lot of times, I work with this a lot with individuals through hormone coaching. There are a lot of stressors that are just the day-to-day, and then the work, the financial, all of those things. But then there are also the underlying ones, whether it's a traumatic event or something that you've held on to for so long, and it literally is causing so much chaos and just a catabolic response internally. You got to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not. We're not psychologists by any means, but we've experienced that a little bit.
For sure.
And they can be detrimental to your body's ability to obviously cope, move on, function, just in general.
Well, then you're trying to trick your body You know, like I'm going to control all of these other things.
You're not smarter.
Why are we not getting to where we want to be? You know,
you are not smarter than your body.
Right.
You never will be. The biggest thing, guys, to kind of wrap this all up, you know, if you are somebody who's experiencing this, or know somebody who has, or maybe you're just curious, it doesn't matter. You're here listening to this for some reason. You gotta keep it simple. You know. You got to understand that there's a physiological consequence for every decision you make. You need your hormones to help regulate your body. We know that the way that we eat and the way that we sleep and the way that we move and the way that we exercise can help benefit all of those systems. It can all play a factor, but you can't have that thought like, I know this is probably not good for me and still do it and expect a good outcome.
Yeah, that's it'll catch up eventually.
It catches up eventually. So, you know, without getting too far, you know, rambling into other specifics, guys, we're going to wrap this little blood sugar thing up. It would be cool to get somebody who, you know, if I can get permission for somebody and they want to actually be on here to share their story,
right,
you know, via their own words, because I know there's some more, you know, psychological connection that could be made. We're just meatheads up here talking X's and O's essentially. I know not everybody gravitates towards that, but just know that there are things that we can do. And there's things that anybody can do. Okay, you don't have to be with us. You can go anywhere and get a head start on this thing and not let a condition kind of define you as X or Y. Like, right, you guys can make some very positive changes just by incorporating and understanding a few little things.
Yep.
Understanding the food you should eat, understanding the sleep you should be getting and how to get it, and then how your mood and how your mindset can have a super important role.
Throw away your smartphone.
You still have your brick phone?
I have one, but I do have a smartphone now.
Yeah, fun story. James got rid of his smartphone last year because he got mad and he bought an old Nokia.
No. The company is Sonam. It was a Sonam XP5.
Well, like the old Nokia phones that had like the plastic cloth wrap on it that was supposed to be the protector. And somebody said that wasn't to protect the phone; it was supposed to protect the floor when you dropped it. Get rid of your smartphone, guys. Get off social media, for goodness sakes. Do something that is going to make you smile and something that you enjoy on a daily basis. Like I said, go buy a bow. I'll show you how to shoot it. It's the most fun thing in the world. Until next time, we got a list full of things that we have as far as podcast plans moving all the way up through 2021. Here soon, we're going to hopefully be helping you guys into 2021 with ideas as far as how you should go about determining, you know, what am I shooting for this year? Not necessarily a goal, but how do I become a better version of myself in 2021 than I was in 2020? So things to come with James and I and some other guests on the way. Anything else you want to add on this one before we wrap it up?
You got it, brother.
Cool. Good podcast. Good talk as always. Guys, thanks for tuning in, listening to the Silver Bullet Podcast. We will catch you guys later.